Have you ever felt that most climbing media only tells stories about what's happening at the pinnacle of the sport, leaving the stories of everyday climbers untold? I'm Kyle, and I believe that there is a growing group of climbers that wants representation. Welcome to the Climbing Majority Podcast, where I capture the stories, experiences, and lessons of non-professional climbers, guides, and athletes from around the world. Come join me as I dive deep into a more relatable world of climbing. Welcome back, everybody. I am your host, Kyle Brocksterman, and today I am going to be sharing a conversation with you that has truly left me inspired and honestly pretty humbled. Wayne Wallace. A name that might not immediately ring bells for some of you outside the Pacific Northwest, but one that should. Wayne is, without exaggeration, a living legend in the climbing world. His dedication to the craft spans decades, and his career has been marked by unparalleled passion, mentorship, alpine route development, and pure adventure. In this episode, we dive deep into Wayne's journey, from his early days discovering climbing in a world where technology for free climbing was just starting to get developed, to decades later, becoming one of the most prolific alpine route developers in the Pacific Northwest, with countless first ascents, including the mythical Mongo Ridge of West Fury. We'll explore his process for creating new routes, the ethical dilemmas of bolting, and how he views his role as a mentor to the next generation. As an advocate for important and thoughtful climbing ethics, he promotes balancing the ego of creation with the responsibility of establishing routes that others can safely climb after you. Wayne also opens up about the transitions climbers face as they age, and what it means to continue finding joy in the sport when your approach and body changes. Wayne's adaptability is a testament for his love for all disciplines of the sport. He openly shares lessons learned from his close calls, the importance of bailing when necessary, and his commitment to leaving a positive legacy. His reflections on balancing ambition with survival are a powerful reminder that climbing is not just about reaching summits. It's about passion, community, and the wisdom you gain as you survive a lifetime of climbing. Talking with Wayne felt like stepping into a world of climbing that I've only scratched the surface of. His humility and depth of experience were both inspiring and a little intimidating. This man has lived a life devoted to climbing in a way that few can comprehend. And now I bring you explorer, mentor, route developer, and self-proclaimed serial sandbagger, Wayne Wallace. Yeah, so what year was it when you started climbing? And how old were you?
I'm going to say approximately 1973. I can't nail the tail on the donkey exactly, but I estimate around 73. I was about 10. But no, it might even be before that, because at 9, I was allowed early entry into the Pathfinder. It's a scouting group where I actually got to try rock climbing with ropes on my own. But before that, I was picnicking at a park, and we ran up the hill not knowing there was a cliff up there. And we ran into a party that was rock climbing up there. And I asked them if I could climb it. It was a 5-6 at Broughton's Bluff. And they're like, sure. They, cranked down the diaper sling a little tighter and wrapped it around, because I was a scrawny little kid, and I climbed it. And I had been vaguely interested in climbing and adventure before that, but when I got to do that in 1970 or something, early 70s, it became a much bigger part of my, thoughts.
Was that like a rare thing to come across, just like random climbers at a crag back then, or was it pretty standardized like it is now?
I believe it was a pretty popular crag back then. It, not as much as now, of course.
And where was this?
At the Columbia River Gorge, right outside of Portland.
Okay.
The first thing you come to on the Oregon side is Broughton's Bluff. It's where the river went into tidewater almost, or the Columbia, where the Columbia Mountain or the Cascade Mountains stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it was about a 20-minute hike up there, and we didn't know that my wife checking up on me. We didn't know that there'd be climbers up there.
Yeah.
You can sort of see rocks up there from the parking lot or whatever, but we didn't know what to expect. And when we did, I don't remember much about asking them. I know I was nervous. I was probably 8 or 9 years old at the time. I was really nervous to ask them, but they just seemed like such a cool group of people that I thought they'd say yes, and they did. They did, of course.
That's cool.
Bless their hearts.
Were your family like was your parents like adventurous people? Were they hikers? Like were they
They were
climbers?
hikers. They
Okay.
were hikers and car campers, but they wouldn't backpack. I wanted to get them to do that. They certainly weren't climbers or or remote,
It tends to be how
remotely.
it goes, right? Like your parents like set the tone for like a certain things, and then the kids take it a step further, and then your next kids
Yeah,
take it a step further.
exactly. We were scrambling away and doing our thing. I'll tell you one of my earliest memories of Oregon. I moved there when I was 2.5 or 3, and I remember we went to Smith Rock, and it was kind of a nothing place, but there was a climber on the rock, and my parents pointed to the climber and said, "Look, Wayne, there's a climber up there. You're interested in climbing, right?" And as a kid, I was interested in lots of different things, and one of them was climbing. But I could never see the person up there. I could never see him. But the fact that there was a person up on that wall, I just pictured him up there, and that was at that early age. That 3 or even I remember that memory really clearly. Just how preposterous the idea was of going up, and most people still think this, going up on a rock wall, tempting fate, as it were.
For sure. And I think it's interesting. Like nowadays with social media and with how much cameras are accessible and how there's just images and videos of climbing everywhere. And it's even surpassed like the inside community of climbing where people who don't know what climbing is still know what climbing is now because of movies like Free Solo. And so like back then we didn't have that kind of saturation of climbing media. So like, how did you even comprehend what climbing was? Like, how did you envision that? Like, what kind of media were you exposed to?
We'd go to the library, and we'd go through the sports section, and maybe there'd be a mountaineering book. I remember one life changing. I'd already rock climbed a little bit, but I remember seeing Gaston Rebuffat's big color glossy coffee table book in our library in like fifth or sixth grade, and I hadn't really gotten into climbing heavily, or certainly alpine climbing at all. But when I saw that, I thought that was tremendous. We wore out our copies of Royal Robbins Basic Rockcraft 1 and 2. We had the REI catalog mailed. I'm a 5-digit REI member. And so
Wow, wow.
we had, the catalogs would come, and those were groundbreaking, seeing the pictures of those. National Geographic occasionally. But they were almost all tuned towards, the big alpine mountains. There wasn't, except for Royal Robbins Rockcraft, there wasn't a big media even telling us how to do it, what to go out and do. I went out literally with my mom's like garage ropes, the, nylon boating type ropes, and tied it around myself and tried to rappel, and the ropes would break, or the
Oh my
trees.
god.
We were obsessed with it, and before we had resources to do it. And then eventually I got paper routes and started supporting, buying a little piece of gear here and there. I remember I went to Broughton's, and this is a powerful moment for me. This was like fate telling me that this was going to happen. I was really wanting a harness, and I went to Broughton's one day. I just rode there on my bike. It was 5 miles away. I rode there, and I hiked up there just by myself, just like soul searching, and there was nobody there. But on the ground was a harness, a real harness, and a couple locking carabiners. And I remember I left it there, and I ran all around the crags looking for anybody, and there was nobody there. So I'm like, okay, booty,
Wow. The universe just granted you a harness.
yeah. But I didn't even have rock shoes until high school. Like I was up there in tennis shoes, and
Mm.
it was mostly aid climbing because I didn't have any upper body strength. I didn't grow till I got out of high school. So I learned aid climbing mostly because I like the gear too.
Yeah, so on that topic, like what was the gear like? You said you started climbing when you were 10 years old. Like, I mean,
We were already being indoctrinated into clean climbing. I remember I got in trouble for pounding a piton in,
oh.
trying to bail myself out of this 5.8 with a piton. Got scared of the lead of a deck fall, and this guy ran to the top of the climb, poked his head over the edge, and said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, "Piton craft." And he's like, "No, we don't do that anymore." So, so there was always pressure of once the nuts came out. I remember I was at school and then the REI catalog, and it's like, fox heads, clean
Wow.
climbing. It was
Wow.
a big deal, and it was scary because boy, pitons sure sound
Yeah, yeah.
it sure felt good.
It's people tend to be resistant to change. Like, do you feel like the community was resistant to clean climbing at first? Or was it like everyone's on board, like this is the new cool thing?
That was a pretty smooth transition because it just did make sense. If you ever went to Yosemite or seen the damage that pitons did, it made sense immediately, especially the British influence. They're so proper and correct. They 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 kicked it through the goalposts, and Americans eventually started putting their hammers away.
It's also faster, right?
Oh yeah, it ended up being faster.
Yeah.
And when cams came out, that was a huge game changer too.
Now, like my buddy and I in the past used to like joke and do like an all nut ascent to try to pay homage to the past. Like, and I find it to be really scary.
Oh, you're
And so,
yeah.
like, were the climbs you guys doing limited to the kind of gear you had, or were you guys just throwing yourself at whatever and just kind of like figuring it out?
So areas around Oregon and the cracks undulated. There was basalt, so they undulated pretty well for stoppers and hexes. And in fact, it climbs at Beacon Rock. I would prefer actually. It's so jagged, and some of the cracks at hex would even work better than a cam because the lobes would hit in really fun places. So it really suited the time and the place, uh, and even Yosemite, the pin scars and everything worked pretty well with stoppers. But you just can't do all of the climbs now with stoppers. Like you used. Everything was really a lot more limited as far as we didn't bolt the faces. We climbed the cracks if we were lucky to have a crack, and then uh, you're going to find something to go in. And it was scary. Uh, I never. I always thought climb better than you need to avoid falls, and I still carry that philosophy even with the great gear we have now. It's still falling is for me as like a last resort.
I think it's awesome that you say that because I agree, and I think like there's a big push in media these days where it's like if you're not falling, you're not trying. Like if you're not falling, you're not pushing your grades. Like you have to be okay to fall. The gear's good, and honestly, I get it if you're trying to become like a super pro and like you need to really figure it out and you have the time to dial the gear and like how to do it safely. But I'd say for most people, the majority as it were, if you're a weekend warrior and you don't have time to like focus too much on like being a master of your gear and you're trying to go out and have an adventure on on-site routes, I would say falling is probably a bad idea in most scenarios.
Yeah, yeah, you can get hurt falling. I've come really close, and I tell you, we're talking about rock climbing here, but
Yeah.
my bias, my most passionate sub sport is ice climbing and mixed climbing, and in the real sense, and that ice climbing especially is a no fall sport. Anyways, so if you buy into that philosophy, and and also I want to on-site things. That's another part, a backbone of my philosophy is I can, project things. I don't have a problem with that. But to me, there's no greater joy than going up and on-siting something. And if I fall, darn, it becomes a project. So that philosophy wraps around all of my climbing. right
So
now.
you are the kind of person that goes back and will climb it clean if you fell, rather than just being like, okay, I fell, I got to the top. I'm like, next, on to the next onsite, on to the next route, on to the next
It
adventure.
depends, but mostly I do like to finish projects that I start.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I'm
but
like
it
totally
depends.
the opposite. It's like, oh, I'll climb her out, I'll fall, I'll get to the top and be like, all right, cool, I'm done. I don't need to do, I've
A lot of
seen
times
it,
I
I've
will
done it.
a lot of
Yeah.
times I will bail off of it, but I'll come back to it,
Mm.
you know, especially
Well,
if it's
that's
really
that's different.
worthwhile.
Like if you fall and you can't get to the top or you can't complete the route, then like totally you got to go back and do it. But if you fall and you get back on and then you finish the route, and it's like for me, I'm like I don't need to go back and do it again to just do it clean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. For like early stages of climbing, like I say like the first year of trad climbing is like super dangerous, especially like even nowadays where you don't really know what you're doing. You could be just like setting booby traps for yourself left and right, and you just don't really know because you're not falling or whatever. So like I mean, I have my own stories. Like I was, I had this vision to like clean this unclimbed face, and we didn't really know how to set up the systems right. And long story short, I ended up getting lowered on the wire of an ATC rather than the metal loop in the back. And I like my full body weight and my partner's was on that loop on the anchor, and like he noticed it and was able to like, hey dude, you need to like grab the wall and you need to come up and not fall. And I survived. It would have been a fatal fall. But like moments like that happen, I think, to a lot of us in our first year of trad climbing because we just don't know. It's like so like were there moments like that for you in the beginning when you were figuring it all out?
Absolutely. A lot of them too, actually. I was a slow learner, and I kind of felt invincible with my early success, and I was kind of cocky and brash. Um, and my friends would argue, you use past tense. But anyways, I got in a lot of accidents when I was young, but rarely injured, but certainly like big epics, snowstorms, epic descents, uh, avalanches, uh, big.
What about like right like in the early stages when you're like, I mean, you said you're starting to climb when you're 10, like ages 10 to 12. Like, do you have a memorable experience in your learning where it was like a
Well,
close
I
call?
did take a ground fall aid climbing, yeah, when I was pretty young, and that was good that I didn't hurt myself really bad, but uh, I should have. One would think that I would have, not had as many accidents. And I was really lucky that I survived them all because some of them were really huge and almost unsurvivable. But somehow I managed to, break a leg here, break an arm there. And knock on wood, I eventually, I think it was sometime in the 90s, I got it. And I'm like, Wayne, you're getting older now. You need to get all you can out of the rest of you and not make any more stupid mistakes. Because if all the stories that I could tell you, none of them were like some random coincidence that, it was me. It was me pushing it. It was me at the, kind of just, uh, I guess we did have a random weather event on El Cap that was really bad. But even then, we didn't have great weather forecasts, I guess, or as good. But, we made mistakes going into that climb that made us take the wrong way down El Cap. And that was an insane epic that was almost, it's amazing we didn't get rescued. And even rescues back then were, you know, not easy, especially during storms. But so I learned, and knock on wood, again, I'll complete my thought. I haven't really had any accidents or injuries or big, incidents where somebody's gotten hurt since the 90s. No great, awful stories. So I think, if you can survive your early career, uh, great, but learn from other people's mistakes if you can. Like listen to podcasts where people do mess up. Read, learn not just if your focus is, trad climbing, it'd be good to learn aid climbing. It would be good to learn, you know, uh, how to, lots of different sports, rescue, lots of different things. that will help that sport. Learn as much as you can about climbing and what you want to do, and it'll be easier to get through it, if you will.
For sure. Yeah, for me, like I had a climbing accident. Have you heard about the climbing accident that I had? Yeah. And so that was like a huge wake up call and a lesson that I survived and was able to learn from. Like, was there like a cliff for you like that where it was like this moment was where I realized like how dangerous this is and I need to take it a little bit more seriously? Or what was the catalyst behind kind of like that mental switch? Because you said like, oh, I was brash, I was cocky, I was kind of like putting myself out on a
I,
limb. Like, when was that switch?
it would have to be 1994. I went through a divorce, and I did 3 back-to-back trips that I shouldn't have done. And only one of them went really well. One of them was a series of avalanches on Mount Johannesburg on a solo attempt that I shouldn't have been doing. And then I wanted to get back to my daughters. And I did. I got through the descent and the avalanches, and I got back to my daughters. I did another trip because it was just a bad time.
Do you mind kind of going into that story a little bit and kind of like going into the details?
Not at all. I can develop it. I I was going through a divorce. My wife was seeing another man. Yada yada. I was almost suicidal, and I grabbed the family minivan and peeled off to the North Cascades with gear, not enough gear, but gear in the car to go do Mount Johannesburg from Portland. And the whole way up there, I remember I was trying to get a weather report on the radio, and nobody was giving me any weather reports. Because I think if I had known there was a big storm coming in, I don't think I would have gone up there. But I get up there and it had a cloud cover about halfway up the mountain. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do it in a push. I'll just go halfway up and spend the night and see how good it is. And I did. I got halfway up, but I was a wreck from the divorce. I wasn't eating. I was overworked. I had no business being. I wasn't in the right mindset. But I did get into a cave and spent the night there. And I woke up in the morning and there was 3.5 feet of snow that had fallen overnight. And I'm halfway up a mile-high wall. As soon as I stepped out of the cave onto the slope, I caused an avalanche right below me. I went back into the cave and I'm like, okay, you've really done it this time. You've got, this is probably it. I kind of had myself, but I told myself I'm going to go out swinging. I want to get back to my daughters, correct this mistake if I can, survive this, get down. I wanted to get down. I suddenly decided I wanted to live after all those bad decisions. I started down. I got hit by an avalanche and I barely hung on. I would tuck my head in and the snow would build up above me and start pushing me down the hill. So I'd have to like clear the snow and then go back into a crouch. And then this went on for like a long time, too long. And by then, it's still like on the fence of whether I should, go back to the cave. By then I'm soaked. So I have to keep going down. So I'm like, an avalanche just hit. So now's your chance. So I jetted down. I picked up my steam, and plus the snow's gone. So it's a little firmer. And I hear another one coming. And the second one, I was able to get out of the gully a little bit, and it just hit me really hard on the side and kept going. And that one was even bigger. But I had crawled off to the side, got down, I got onto a bigger slope. I heard another big one coming. So I ripped out of the gully onto that. Because if you rip out of the gully, it gets into deep snow again. And then, the avalanche. But I was able to get fully out of the third one, and it was huge. And then just in conclusion, it was fully epic finding my way back down this mountain without a rope. I got to the last cliff band and I was stuck and I couldn't tell where to go. But it had turned to rain, and the snow, I had gotten down lower where there wasn't as much snow, and it washed away the snow. And I sat there long enough to where it washed away the snow and I could see my old footprints. in the snow. So I knew which way to go. And I got down and I literally kissed the ground next to the car.
Wow.
It took all day to get down too.
Wow.
It was miserable. So yeah, I had another accident not too long after that, but that one I don't think was much as my fault as I was pushing it on a loose rock. And I was on a section of rock trying to do a new route. And the whole section of rock that I was standing on all around me all came off. Luckily, I had a bolt that was way down by my belayer. But that was a 60-foot fall with mass projectiles orbiting around you.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I survived that one and did the self-rescued because we were 400 foot up and then a big approach. So that's about all I was about how much I pushed it. You get the gist. I had probably 5 or 6 episodes with a similar quality.
In like a short amount of time or spread over in your career?
No, from 80s to 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, my early climbing career was just, I had great success. If you looked at my resume, during that period, it'd be like super, but you wouldn't see all of the epics.
For sure, yeah. You don't tell those stories.
And the failures, yeah. But I think that you learn so much from them. Like they really shaped me into the climber I am today. I'm super careful now. And I'm super willing to turn around. I'm the bail master. I still get up a lot of things, but man, if it's not falling into line and groovy, I'm out of here. Because I tell people that hopefully you get to a point where you've done enough great climbing where you don't have to settle for the BS climbing. You don't have to settle for that. You can go, rest up and try it again some other time.
I feel like a lot of the times we kind of push ourselves into these situations, each person is going to be slightly different, but when climbing like takes up a large portion of our self-worth, and then like we use it to validate our ego, we use it to validate our self-worth. Like, do you feel like you got into a position in your climbing career where like it became all encompassing and like that was your source of happiness? Or have you always balanced your life to where you have passions in other areas?
I've been very climbing centric, from the early ages on. I have had other balances in my life. I've always had, family and my career as a high-rise carpenter. I've had to dedicate a lot of resources to that. I've always been a homeowner, sometimes multiple homes. And I've always been involved in my community and teaching. So there's where I find my balance, is just overachieving in as much as I can and still overachieve at climbing too, because no matter what I get into, watch out. I'm coming after it, whether it's, a family member that needs some help or whatever, I'll do what I can usually to help out.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I've just, in my own personal life and from people that I've talked to on the show, it seems like there's a small group of people, and climbing can be that way where it's so validating and so fun and fulfilling that you can just like myopically just put everything into it. And then, when you're not meeting certain milestones for yourself or something like that, it just can be, it can kind of turn into this negative input rather than like something that's fulfilling your life.
Yeah, no, it's a fickle mistress because you're never guaranteed success or even satisfaction. And it's all in expectations too. What are you expecting to get out of it? And are you getting it? I really like the climbing movement. I like the after party feeling of success. I like projecting. I like the stuff before the climb. I like going through all the details and the gear and the planning. I'm into it. I like a good challenge, and the 3D puzzle you get with climbing, it's really hard to find that anywhere else, and have it constantly be changing and different every time, and so many different sports. I just can't think. I sometimes compare climbing to track and field, because track and field is 50 different sports. Well, so is climbing, and they're super specialized, and so is climbing. But I get satisfaction out of all of them, and I can get into the details about and I'm weak in some of them, obviously, but I'm still interested in picking up the details and picking up even a new challenge. When I hit 50 some years old, I took up indoor bouldering for the first time, and I freaking love it. I'm obsessed with it. And it's because I started watching the World Cup videos, and I started visualizing myself figuring out these puzzles, and I became hooked, completely hooked on indoor bouldering. Love it.
It's definitely a multifaceted sport. It's like with the amount of rock in the world and the amount of climbing potential, you could have a new adventure every time you go out. And that goes for just a single discipline, and that goes to like every single discipline. It's just like everywhere you turn is just a new adventure. It's really, really cool.
And types of adventure, and you can combine different adventures too. I want to get into canyoneering pretty soon. I think it's a great thing for an old guy to do.
For sure.
You're easier on your body and still adventurous and exploring.
Very much so. To the topic of mentoring. So you had mentioned that when you first started climbing, you were the one that was going out. Were you bringing partners with you, or did you have like a mentor in the very beginning that was like always taking you out and teaching you, or were you that for other people?
People would orbit into my menteeship. Like I would run into Alan Watts and climb with him, or he's so many better than me. And I was hungry for that, but I was young and I didn't have any resources and not particularly strong. But so I felt like I had to, like teach my partner that I wanted. And I'd pick people that were interested and I'd take them out and teach them the sport. Or people that were new to it, I'd take them to the next level. I really wanted somebody reliable and stoked. And you can't get great climbers that are way above your ability as easily. So I did a lot of teaching, and I still do. Not a lot, but I still do an amount of teaching and mentoring. And I still get mentored too. I get mentee, or I'm the mentee, or whatever. I like to go out and learn what the guides are doing. So every year I sign up for a program where I both teach and find out what the guides are doing and the latest techniques are. Because an older person has, they're set in their ways, and that's definitely me. But I'm open to the new ways.
You brought up two good topics here. What guide service or what program is that?
It's through the mountaineers. It's called Alpine Ambassadors. They take their teachers and they get them the latest information and hook them up with hotshot guides and have them get pushed. Because our teachers in the mountaineers, they'll teach, 10, 12 people at a time, and they won't work on their own skills as much. And I've done it 3 out of the last 7 years, 3 or 4 years. And that's how I met my wife.
Oh, cool.
Was the first iteration of that. And then the first day they go out with guides, or the first couple days, everybody, and they're evaluated, and I'm listening to what they say because they're telling, me what the latest sort of climbing techniques are. And I evaluate them for myself, and I either use them or I don't.
Nice. Yeah, I think the topic I like about guides is just because I was talking to Max Lurie about this recently. He's Alpine to the Max is Instagram. He's a guide on the East Coast. And we were talking about like partners and how it's like some people have a really hard time finding partners and finding people to climb with. And so, you can resort to partner finding on like Mountain Project or Facebook groups. And it's kind of rolling the dice because you don't really know who you're going to meet. Like they could be sketchy. They could say they know what they're doing, but they have absolutely no idea. And you end up on this epic. And so it's like, I think one of the funnest thing about climbing is the partnerships that you build, and like going out with friends, going out with people that like having a good time and sharing that experience with people is what is part of the reason why I love climbing so much. And it's hard when some people are struggling to find that, but I also think it's important to share the narrative of like hiring a guide, like especially in the very early stages of climbing, like one session with a guide to go out there and just teach you the basics on how to stay safe on a multi-pitch scenario or how to use trad. I think it's like a super, super important thing to share with the community. Like, do you agree with that? And do you have any personal experience with like working with a guide?
I absolutely agree with that as advice for people, and it's really good to see that happening in this country, because this was a really guide diverse country until like Canada started doing it, and Europe's always done it. But here, um, I think that was one of the offshoots of our sociology, which it is very difficult to find partners, and that's what led me to do some of my biggest climbs alone, solo. Of course, was just the availability of people, and I'm struggling now because I retired. I'm struggling to find midweek partners too, because uh, it's great to have, and I've always benefited from a little group of like 5 or 6 people, and between one of them, I can usually get a bite. And I'm getting to the age where I know more people that are retired. But the Northwest concept, the concept of the Northwest climber is a very fluid one. I think people move here, they get good, and they move away because of our weather. Uh, so that there's a lot of turnover in partners too. Um, and especially, good quality partners. They move to Colorado, they move to Utah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think that I've been, I don't know if it's lucky or not, but like I'm very much a weekend warrior, and so I'm always like, I don't have problem finding partners. It's like it's because I'm not really climbing that much. It's like when you start climbing every day, or you're trying to find partners for, like you said, midweek. It's like that's when it starts to get problematic. Or if you start climbing really hard or dangerous routes, it's like now your pool of people is just shrinking more and more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So why do you think that American climbing culture has been adverse to guides? And I feel like they kind of get like almost the short end of the stick in terms of like, when I always feel like there's this battle between like pro athletes and guides. I feel like there's like this eternal conflict between the two of them. And I feel like it's because guides don't get as much recognition or representation in the community. Like you kind of alluded to that and saying that, it's been new to our culture. Like, why do you think that is?
Well, we're rugged individuals. We're descendants from the pioneers, and they were let's strap down the wagon and go kind of people. Um, and we had our first descents were done by prospectors and miners and loggers. So you don't need guides for that. But it's changing in America, and it's becoming a more prestigious and more needed, if you will, because less experienced people are going further than ever, from what I can tell. And if there's not this culture of doing it right and doing it safely, and being a responsible party and having a leader, I've I, I've seen a lot of trouble come from just a vacuum of knowledge on how to do things right. And a guide is not just somebody that can take you out and show you a good time; they can teach you. And so their role, I think, is going to increase, and it's going to become more prestigious. I know there's all these jokes about guides and pizza and families and whatnot, but I think that's changing. And some of my good friends are guides, and they're teaching more interesting classes too, like big wall climbing is really popular, and crack climbing and trad climbing, and they're teaching it to mountaineers so that the mountaineers can go and teach it to the people that are just coming out and paying for the little classes. One of my early motivators was keeping a journal.
Okay.
My aunt bought me one at a bookstore when I was pre-adolescent, like really young, when I announced to her that I was going to be a big famous climber soon. She found a climbing journal and she bought it for me, or maybe I found it. I don't remember, but I had this journal in my hand, and now it was up to me to go and fill the pages of the journal. So that's what started I never kept a diary or anything like that, but I kept a climbing journal and I recorded every climb I've ever done in the last 50 years. And it's been really great because I started right from almost the very beginning when I climbed Mount St. Helens in 1976. That was the first significant climb I felt. And I kept hard journals until the computer age. And then I kept a computer journal, and I still do. And I even had a website for a number of years too, until I got tired of that, of doing a website. But it's still online, and it still has, like, not my complete career, but all of the highlights of my career from like the very early days to go through. And that's been a motivating thing because that led to list building in my journal too. One of the things I had was a list of all the things I wanted to climb. And that was also, just keeping something on record has really helped me crystallize what I want to do in climbing. But what it's done for me is, since I'm getting old and I don't have a good memory, I can go back to my journal and be reminded of details and times of year and stuff like that about the climbs. But the other thing it shows is all the different phases I went through in my climbing career. And that's been really, and I'm in a different phase right now, but I wouldn't know it if I didn't look at the kind of climbs I was doing versus the kind of climbs I'm doing now. They're remarkably different in a lot of ways, but I still chase after the big routes. But in my alpine retirement, I won't take overnight gear as much, and I won't do alpine climbs anymore, like big risky ones. I think there's a time and a place in a person's life for that if they want to alpine climb. But if you're not absolutely stoked to be there and have everything clicking, you don't belong there. You absolutely don't belong up there. And that's me now. I don't belong up there. But there was a time and a place where I really, really enjoyed alpine climbing. I'm almost a prophet against alpine climbing and soloing and the likes, because I've had friends die from it, and I'm lucky I survived mine. So rather than being this big advocate for it, I'm like be careful kind of advocate. Take your time, survive your career, and be willing to come back. Because the other thing with my journal is I've written in attempts, and I've had attempts not as many as successes, or I'd be really depressed or whatever. But attempts, I think, like we've already talked about, they'll teach you more almost than any success can sometimes, about the big picture.
Yeah, because if you don't make it, then there's a lesson there on why, right?
Yeah. Why didn't you make it?
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look.
You brought up the topic of fear. You said if you're not in the moment and present and psyched, and you're like just afraid or uncomfortable, like you shouldn't be there. Where's the dance there? Because I think that, like, there's perceived risk and there's real risk, and like sometimes fear can creep in, and it's like where's that balance for you? Obviously, you're referring to the alpine, which is like typically extremely dangerous situations. Like, how are you balancing fear in those moments? And like, when do you know when it's time to turn around versus when you just like, okay, I need to like just calm myself down and realize like, okay, like I can do this. And like, yes, it's risky, but I can like pull myself together and get going.
The dossier on me would say Wayne is still really gung-ho and really pushy, and you kind of have to pull the reins back on him, is what the dossier would say on me. What I look for is my partner. How is my partner doing in that moment? Because that, when I watched the Honnold movie, and he's talked about how he's missing some part of his brain that has a fear.
Yeah, the amygdala. Yeah.
The amygdala. I could see a bit of myself in that. I don't think I have enough fear oftentimes because I've had so much success and confidence, and I know my body and I know climbing. So if I'm scared, it's not, I can get scared, but it's not good. Like, I should leave. I personally should leave because, I don't get scared enough. So I look to my partner. How are they doing? I'm really good at sandbagging people, including myself, included. So I have to keep the reins pulled back on myself, almost artificially, because I can override. I've had bad things happen, but I tell myself it's because I did something dumb. So as long as I'm not doing something dumb, I don't get afraid in the situation. If I I get excited, but I'll channel that into the energy to climb. Sometimes I'll get out extended and I'll get afraid, and I'll use that as a energy boost to get to the top of the climb. But I don't get like really traumatized either, typically. I guess I'm lucky, and
Yeah, I
I
mean, it sounds like even some of the situations, like the story about the avalanche, like that could have been like a career ending thing just mentally for somebody. It's like, that was it. That was too close. I'm done. Like, I don't even need to do this anymore. Um, so like what about the sport keeps drawing you back, even though you've been like so close to the edge so many times?
well, it's it's changed for me because I don't. I'm more attuned to the risk that I'm putting myself in than I was back then. I just didn't care as much back then about risk and and all that. I was there for the reward, and the risk was just, you know, something that happened, and maybe it goes south. We'll get out of it, somehow. I always sort of carried that with me. But I don't place myself in as risky places anymore. And I think some of that is the gear is amazing. The gear has allowed me to have more confidence again. And just you also, when you get the miles in to climbing, it's more second nature. Time is going to catch up with you eventually. And I can feel that happening. I'm not as, steady and as sure as I used to be. But if you get enough reps in with climbing, you should be able to do pretty amazing things in your life, just with the repetition and getting good at it, if you will.
Yeah. What about that actual moment though? Like a really close call. Like why was it not like a career ending event, like in your mind?
Because it was my fault. It was my fault, and I did something stupid. I committed an offense against myself, and I get upset with myself when I do it all the time. I mess up a lot often. I've told you about Wayne luck. Well, it's not really luck. It's like Wayne consequences, because I try to skip steps. I'm impatient. I try to get things done as efficiently as possible. And you're going to make mistakes if you're in that mindset. And if you do that climbing, you're going to make. So I've had to, like I say, I pull the reins back on myself as much as I can, because I am, really, really driven and really motivated. But I also am smart enough now to know, a lot more about my limitations and where I can push it and where I have to back off. Because man, I got 100 carabiners I'll leave behind before before I'll get injured or allow myself to get injured again if I can help it.
For sure, yeah. I mean, like you said, you're the bail master. I think that's another narrative that's important to say. It's like it's easy, it's okay to turn around and go back. You don't have to climb until you fall. Um, the Wayne's luck. Do you want to kind of expand on that a little bit? It seems
Can I
like
just tell you a story about my day real quick?
please, yeah, please do.
I was doing some electrical work in the house, and I hit the GFCI switch, and it tripped like it's supposed to. If you plug in something that's in water, it'll stop it. And it's a kitchen breaker. It stopped, and all the switches on my kitchen stopped, and it wouldn't turn back on. So I'm like, oh, darn, that's not going to turn back on. I have one out in the shed. Let's put a new one in. This is an old one. So I take it out, and it's packed full of ants.
Oh,
It's completely it's the ants destroyed the electrical works in the switch. And so I'm like, oh, bummer. Bummer. So I pull it out and throw it away, go out into the shed to get a new one out of the shed, and I get my electrical kit out, and I pull out a new GFI, and it's ants. It's packed full of ants from out in the shed. And we don't have a big ant problem, but those little sugar ants, for some reason, they like GFCI switches.
Weird.
So I had to go to the store today to get our kitchen to work again, our kitchen outlets. I had to go to the store, to the hardware store. I usually have to work harder for what I get than what I think is fair. But I think it's a product of how much I ask of myself. Like, I do have a big list of to-do stuff, and I am trying to get it done as quickly as possible because the season's short. And time, even retired, I'm really busy. So things are bound to happen if you kind of work at a frantic pace, or you're impatient. Mistakes come quicker and easier.
Mm.
And then I also carry a certain bit of irony with things too that I can't really describe in a couple of stories. But I've just come to expect it. And it's helped me to kind of just zen everything out a bit, because I'm not in control of a lot of things. I like to think I am, but things are going to happen outside of my control. And all I can do is kind of watch out for them and just work harder to get there. So I'm not afraid of working hard.
Yeah, it's the luck is an interesting thing, and it can work for or against us. Do you feel like you're like wait, so how many climbs have you climbed up to this point? Like your journal, do you know the number?
I can only estimate, but I'm really I'll take you back to my focus, and that's big climbs. I think I just got over 1,000 big climbs in my life, and a big climb is anything over 3 pitches, anything technical or big. Yeah, I just kind of have a floor on that. So I've gotten around 1,000 of big climbs, probably tens of thousands of regular. I've always really liked cragging too. So I've done thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of crag climbs and individual climbs. And I only just started ticking them on Mountain Project. If I had to go back and tick them all, it would just take forever. But I've been really lucky to have had I'm getting, now that I'm retired, I'm getting, over 150 days a year, and probably 1,000 pitches a year, I guess.
Wow.
I don't know. I'd have to look at, I can only estimate because of the volume, and I don't have the time to do that hard of a count either. It's been great to be able to do it and have the longevity.
Yeah, it's an incredible amount of time. Was there any period of your life where you like stepped away from climbing and like took a break?
When I was raising kids,
Okay.
yeah, the early 90s, my resume it shrinks down.
Like, did you turn into a weekend warrior, or did you like completely
Yeah.
like? Okay.
We made a deal when I was raising the kids. I would get one weekend a month, and I would get 1 weekend day a month to go cragging. So 3 days a month is about what I was doing during the child rearing part. And sometimes not even that, if responsibilities came up. And I still like to think I'm a very dedicated father.
So the longevity, the amount of time you've climbed, how have you stayed alive this long? Because I think
Good question, because I had a
there's-
dangerous career too, as a high-rise carpenter. Very, very dangerous job. I survived that. Learning from mistakes and learning safety. I think what construction really went hyper safety when their insurance rates started spiking, and that rubbed off into my climbing, because I got injured at work too. I'd break a foot, cut off a finger or two,
what?
and it would
Do you have your fingers?
transfer. I cut this one off with a skill saw in 80 or 94, and this one got pinched off but reattached
Holy shit.
in 20 something. So yeah, and then I broke a foot in 90 something.
Those are like that seems like pretty traumatic injuries. Did that
Yeah.
affect your climbing?
They suck. A little bit. Like I can't get this finger into a thin crack as easy.
Oh,
So
wow.
I do a lot of adaptive, but I can still do it.
Yeah.
And I have huge hands too, as you can tell. So and I don't know why I'm drawn to thin cracks. I have no business in the thin crack business because they're so hard for me, but I love them. So the safety aspect really rubbed off on me, and it kept me fit too. Construction kept me fit for climbing, kept me back and forth. But what I had to do is take care of myself. I had to get rest. I had to take. I had to learn how to eat well, take supplements, take care of myself. There's a lot of time that we don't even think about that it takes to take care of ourselves. And we start skipping steps, it's not good because you've got to have everything's got to be operating at a high level to be successful, to climb, to work every week and climb every weekend throughout the summer. You got to be taking good care of yourself. You really do.
I've heard people say like there's a balance between like preparation, skill set, and like just pure luck out in the mountains. It kind of seems like your Wayne's luck or the hijinks you find yourself outside of the world of climbing might be a price you're paying for the luck you've received in the mountains. Have you ever thought about it like that?
Yeah, I think that there is a balance to be had with the amount of success that I've had and the success that I expect. So whenever something comes up, I'm like, oh, you know, why? But I can't, life is going to do what it's going to do.
Yeah, but
And so
do
much,
you experience that like let's just Wayne's luck as like this kind of like a comical unluckiness, right? That's kind of how it's
yeah,
being. Yeah, so like, do you experience that in the mountains too, or is it just outside of your life of climbing?
no, it goes with climbing too. Skipping steps and trying to rush things along hastily. It can lead to bad feelings with your partners and people too. I have to pull back my aura and everything sometimes because I'll be belaying somebody and they'll say, "Oh man, I know you think I'm going so slow." And I'll be like, "What? No, I'm enjoying the view. I don't have to lead. Take your time. We got plenty of time."
Yeah.
I have to pull back all of me to just not appear to be, hyper active, if you will. 'Cause I was blessed with a lot of energy and a lot of stamina and, um, I was working 16 hours a day, sometimes all week, and then going climbing all weekend and getting rest at work the next week. I was doing amazing things when I was young, and I still have a bit of that today. I just worked last summer full time. I know I said I was retired. I just worked all summer last year full time and built a house
Wow.
in the evening and got it ready to rent by November
Wow.
too. So that just shows that I could, old Wayne came back for an appearance and then collapsed in December. But then I went, that's ice climbing season. I had an amazing ice climbing season too.
And that's just natural for you, just high energy. You have a
It is.
motivation to just constantly be doing things.
I take every day and I strangle it. And I stomp on it. I get everything I can out of it every day. That's my philosophy on it. And that's how I've been an overachiever as long as I have, whether it's been, in construction or climbing, just whatever my focus is on. I'm, I'm a restless soul. What can I say? I do know how to relax too.
Okay.
I will add that I have, but that's something I've had to learn. And also the demand is there because I'm getting older. So there's more demands on me to rest. So I'm definitely, my kitty has helped a lot with that because she'll curl up on my lap and I won't boot her off, but I'll just
Cat
sit there.
paralysis. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a
She's,
real thing.
been, she's been a really good companion for my retirement.
Nice. So with the survival thing, like up to this point, would you say like luck played a large role in your survival and like your long-term climbing career, or was it more like your preparation and your skills on the mountain?
A lot of it was luck, especially with the big traumatic accidents. that happened. It was luck. I was lucky to get out of the situation I put myself in. So it's like, I almost don't like the word luck, because we're not rolling dice all the time here. We're going out and we're doing something very deliberate that we should respect a lot. So we're carrying some of our luck with us, and other times, there are random things that can happen out of our control or out of our circumstances. So we have to kind of roll with our luck, but it's not something to overly prioritize. Preparation is a big part of luck, because you'll be a lot more lucky
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you're really well prepared. And that's one of the things that I really I've always sort of excelled at, and it's kept me pushing my luck, if you will, because I've thought, well, I have a plan and I'm prepared, and I think I know what's coming up.
Yeah, you got to set yourself up for luck to happen.
Yeah, I can
To be on your side.
engineer my best circumstance to get to the top of what I want to get to successfully, and be willing to fail.
hmm Have you ever contemplated like death in the mountains and like
Oh yeah.
what that would mean? Like, would it still be worth your efforts if you perished in the mountains? Like, have you processed that at all?
I tell people and this is by one of my Wayneisms, one of my Wayne quotes, I'm just well enough known to worry about how I die. And I don't want it to be in a bathtub, falling out of a bathtub or something, but it probably will, because of my irony luck. It
Yeah.
probably will be trying to get up over a curb and I trip it, so it's something I don't want to go out. I want to go out with an old age, but I could see death in the mountains, possibly because the biggest thing I think that worries me, or I fear in the climbing world, is large loose blocks specifically. I've had experiences, the time when they all came off. I've had other ones shift, just giant ones. I've had giant ones come off. And we're always climbing these cracks and structures that are just there until the next earthquake, possibly, especially basalt columns. So if that's what calls my number, I'll be like, of course. And that will be, to me, that would be like a respectable way to kind of go out, if you will. Obviously, when I'm dead, I'm not going to worry about how I died. But until then, I think it's been one of the motivators for me to come back from that 5-6, that easy route alive and careful, because that's not how I want to go, man. I want it to, it's going to be in a blaze of glory, hopefully, or old age. One of those two things. But other than that, what I tell people is, man, I've had like 6 lifetimes worth of amazing experiences all over the world. And I've had a good life. So I don't fear death as much, because I've gotten so much out of it that I'm still, not trying to rush the process. I quit smoking 10 years ago. I used to smoke and chew tobacco, but I thought, man, you're going to die anyways. Why hurry it?
Yeah, why speed up the process?
And I want to get as much, and at 61 now, maybe I got another 20 good quality years. I want to get all I can out of that too. So maybe after that you ask me again after that about the death question, but right now it's the last place I want to die.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel the same. I think it's like you have to be honest with yourself in that you are putting yourself in a situation where you could die. And I think it's not smart to be ignorant to that fact and be like, well, it's impossible. Like, I won't let that happen. It's like, you could. And I think it's important to at least recognize that risk that you put yourself in, but also do everything in your power to not let that happen. And I think that recognizing the risk of death is an important step, because it makes you take what you're doing a little bit more seriously.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's if you have a normal climbing career, you're going to have an accident. it's a game of numbers. It really is. I'm sure there's a person out there that won't, but it just comes down to the numbers. And so every climb, every pitch is really, it's important. It's important. It's not, you don't want to let your guard down, because gravity is quick and it's brutal. You know that.
I
You
know
know
it all
that
too
too.
well. Yeah. The veil between completely in control and either death or serious injury is like paper thin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love like survival books, and a book I would recommend on the subject is blanking on the name, but the subtitle is Why Some People Survive and Some Don't. Deep Survival, that's what it's called. And it tells a bunch of really great stories with kind of the backstory and the narrative. And a person like me is actually a really high demographic for accidents and rescues, because we have the narrative so well set in our heads that we're telling this story, even if it's going south, we're still telling this confidence story and where I know what I'm doing story. So it's principles like that, I think, and reading about, survival and even rescue, it would be a big help to anybody that wants to push it and come back okay, learn.
How do you feel about the topic of like sharing your objectives and sharing your accomplishments and being open about that in the community, both digitally and in person? Like you've created this website, you've got all these lists up there. Like, have you been a very public person about, sharing your objectives and your story up to this point, or what has that been
Yeah.
like?
And some of it is from my past, because we didn't have forums in my past. So if I saw somebody in a climbing parking lot, I'd be like, "Oh my God, did you hear that? Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that?" There wasn't. So now I can just tell everybody about this amazing climb instantaneously to a large audience. I'm really excited about it. And I've always been that excited person in the parking lot that has to pull himself away from chatting with their friends about the latest things that have been going on with climbing. Because I have been, doing a lot of first ascents, and some of them languished for decades because I wasn't able to give them a forum. And now they're some of the most popular routes in the state, routes that I did in the 80s and even earlier. The new routes on Mount Hood, until I helped publish the guidebook on that. Those routes languished in obscurity for decades. There was 14 parties on the east face of Mount Hood last year on the Black Spider, because I was able to share. Mark Leclerc, in his movie, he talks about that. He right out front, he said, "I'm not the kind of person that would do this movie or insert media here, but people did that for me, and they shared their experiences. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what is happening." So you're not going to know how climbing's changing. You're not going to know what's getting done if you're not participating and reading and learning. It's an amazing, very fluid sport, and it's constantly reinventing itself and changing and expanding, both publicly and specifically, locally. So I think it's amazing that we have the forums and gadgets that we can use to share. And I've always been, we had our golden era in the Cascades. Our last one was the CascadeClimbers.com era. And I was a big part of that. And Mark Leclerc was a big part of that too. And I have a feeling, his soloing and ice climbing, and I might have been an influence on him. I never got to meet him, but I was one of the people that was out doing big solos and new routes during that era. And he was a kid in jeans who was posting that he fell down one of the Chiums and a tree stopped him as a teenager. And we chuckled at him back then. But look what he was able to blossom into. So I've always been a big sprayer, and I always will be. And the haters can hate on me all they want.
Do you have
Um,
a group of haters?
I'm sure I do. I'm sure I do. Well, I'm naturally jealous too, and
Mm.
it's one of my motivating. I'm competitive, and I'm jealous of what hot shot over there is
So do
doing
you think
too.
that's what it's born of, is jealousy?
Well, no, I think that's a jealousy's negative. Positive is, oh my gosh, I want to go out and do something like that too, and something that's exciting and popular, and it's very satisfying to have one of your old routes become very popular, if you will. And there's a few in the Cascades now that are just getting massively hit by people, like on the Tooth, or on the Fang, and on Dragon Tail, this my friend, and there's these routes that'll pop up and suddenly become massively popular. And that was one of my motivations when I went up to the enchantments last year. Is I said, I want one of those routes. That's really classic and really popular. And I went and found one that I think is pretty classic. It's gotten mixed reviews, but I literally called it the Song of the Summer because I'm seeing these routes that they're great climbs too. I've done almost every one of them, and they're just amazing. But one of the cool things about climbing is we can still find more of these things. And it'd be extra satisfying if I, was able to do it myself. So that's just one of the reasons that I like sharing is for that
I think
reason.
that
Find
Yeah,
out
I
what's
think that
going on.
there's like some people that like struggle with spray or sharing their accomplishments with the world, because it brings into question the motivation behind it in the first place, right? Like why are you doing it? Are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it because you're looking for recognition or clout, or you want other people to climb it as well? And so like, have you struggled with that at all, or has it just been like just very clear in your mind in terms of just, I'm doing this because, one, I love it, and two, because if other people can enjoy it too, then that's awesome.
No, there's that. There's, I think, in that order, but there is a stroke to the ego that happens here too, without a doubt. And I told you I came from a black sheep of the family. I didn't get much attention. I didn't ask for much attention, but I didn't get much attention as a kid. So I probably naturally crave a bit of that, and I can't deny that. It's who I am. Um, if I annoy you, I'm sorry. I'll try to tone it back. But if we're not honest about our motivations, ah, I think we can get a little pious and get a little unjustifiably cocky through reticence or through sandbaggery and the like. Um, I like to think that what I do is out of enthusiasm. Both, I love the sport, I love the movement, the motion, the logistics, the after party. I love the whole package. And for me to not be a cheerleader for it, or an advocate, or a sprayer, or a new route developer, I feel like I'm holding something back if I'm not giving my fullest to my sport. And I do have ownership of my sport because I'm like a public figure a bit, and so I take that really seriously too. And I want to be a benefit to the community. I go to the festivals. I volunteer. And the city government too. I'm always, I always think that things can be improved if we put our heads together and act as a body.
So, we've talked a lot about kind of like the psychology of your climbs, and um, a lot of different topics. I'm curious as to maybe diving into some of like some specific stories that you might have in the holster. And I think that, I mean, you've got so many, I don't even know where to start. And so I'm going to kind of lean on you here. I think that, like, what are some of the main like things that you've been proud of, or the climbs and the stories that you feel have kind of fulfilled and influenced your life the most?
Yeah, thanks. You're just like, did you get a copy of my notes? Because you're just going right through them. Thanks. The biggest things that I'm the most proud of with climbing and the experiences are my biggest first ascents. And that culminated with only a 3-year campaign, 3 or 4 year campaign in the picket range. And it started in 2003. I was working miserable full-time hours, and I sprung away for a 4-day weekend, and we did the Southern Pickets Traverse in 4 days. And that was Colin Haley, his first big climb near out like that, his first grade 6.
So
Uh,
what, like, I mean, for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, I have no idea what you're talking about.
he's one of
No, not
America's
Colin Haley. I mean the
top
Pickett's Traverse. Like, what does this
oh,
entail? Like,
oh,
what is it?
people know about Colin. Okay, it's a series of 14 really rugged summits in the North Cascades, the most rugged summits. And it's like a jigsaw blade with 14 summits, glaciers on both sides, really sharp summit pinnacles. Every summit's technical, except for maybe one is 4th class. Not all the ridges had been climbed together continuously either. All the summits had been climbed, but nobody had climbed them continuous. And I was obsessed with that, like you wouldn't believe. And I recruited Colin, even though he was 17 years old at the time. I recruited him because he was the strongest person I knew and had the enthusiasm for it. And he tried it without me. It's part of that story, but he didn't make it until he teamed up with me, and then
So
we
you
were able
told
to
him about it, and
successfully
then he went out and tried to
finish
take it
it.
on his own?
Yeah, he's
What a jerk.
competitive. He's a competitive young man. Yeah, well, it's an idea, you know. I felt like it was my idea, but to him, it was just like any other. It's like, oh yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. So he took his other partner and went and tried it. And they were going to try it again, but I said, "No, you're coming with me." And he's like, "This is the time. We're getting good weather. The snow's going to melt. You won't get enough water. Let's do this, Colin. You have the time." He's like in high school or something, right? Trying to reason with a high schooler. And he's like, "Okay, well, can I bring Mark, the guy I tried it with last time?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So we did, and we climbed it. And they leaned on me quite a bit because I was super driven. I was really comfortable with free soloing, so I'd actually scout ahead a bit and then rope up with them if it got tough, or volunteer to do the first ascents on things if it looked really tough. And just, I was Gollum and they were Frodo and
Mhm.
Sam is what it felt like. I obsessed with the ring, and we did get to the end. We did throw the ring in, and it was like a highlight of my life. But that just started a quest of like 6 or 8 new routes that I did in the pickets, roughly, or it seems like 6 or 8 routes. I did the Northern Picket Traverse. After that, I tried the complete, but I couldn't do the complete. I did this first ascent of the Haunted Wall, which gave me the vision to do the Southwest Ridge of Fury. It's also called Mongo Ridge, is the slang name we had for it at the time. And I saw it, and I was on strike at work, and I'm like, "Mike, we got to climb this." And he's like, "Oh, I've got another climb coming up, so I can't climb it right away with you, but let's do it next year or whatever." And I'm like, "Nah, man, we got to climb this." And full circle, I went to Colin Haley. Colin was famous by this time, 3 years later. And I went to his slideshow in August on an ice climb. And it blew me away what he was doing. So I went back home and packed and went and soloed it the next day. It took me 5 days to solo the biggest climb, possibly in the lower 48 United States, possibly the biggest alpine climb ridge in the lower
What
48.
route is it? What mountain?
It's called the
Mongo
Mongo Ridge,
Ridge?
is what we nicknamed it, because it was Mongo. It was literally Mongo.
What was that like? Like, what
It's
was that like?
huge.
Like, kind of like bring you're going through like all these objectives really quickly. Like I want you to pick
The
pick
northern
pick
pickets. So
one and
let
like
me
bring
back
me
up.
through step by step, like what that process was
The
like.
northern pickets was really tough because it was
Mm,
stormy the whole way across. We were getting
jeez.
rain and sleet, and that was, I shouldn't have pushed it as much as I did on that, especially at the finish, but we survived it, and it was tough. Mongo was something I almost had to remove myself from, because if I had allowed myself to be big pictured with that route, it would have been overwhelming. So I had to small picture it. I had to say, well, I can get to the summit. Well, of the East Fury. Well, I can go down the other side. Well, I can get on the Mongo Ridge and I can try to climb out. I did. I was able to do it.
Over 5
And
days?
it was really hard over 5 days.
Like, what was the logistics of bringing food? Like, are you stashing water? Like, how the hell are you surviving?
I had some back
Okay.
caches for on my way back, but I had to do this giant loop and I had to take a bivvy, and I used the bivvy on the route because it's grade 6. It was 25 to 30 pitches long. It had a series of towers that required up to multiple rappels to get down the other side. So it was ultimate in commitment and ultimate in size too. It's 4,000 feet tall, not counting the towers that you have to rappel over and over. And then the route finding was horrendous. And we talk about routes that become popular. It just saw its third ascent, but its first proper ascent, the way I did it, which I stayed on the ridge. The first two parties had to go kind of around one of the cruxes because they were running low on time or stoke for being on a ridge top for 2 to 3 days in that intensive an environment. So I get the satisfaction of, that over a decade later, it's now becoming more popular, if you will, because it's been climbed before now. It's been climbed a second time properly.
Yeah, at least it's seen some traffic for sure. What
Yeah,
were the people's, response to the route and the
they were
commitment?
they
Like,
were completely blown away. I don't know the last two guys that did it. They're literally from North Carolina and with Minnesota. They saw it years ago or found out about it years ago, and they obsessed and planned and tried it twice and got partway up, and they finally made it just last year.
oh, cool.
And I'm climbing with one of them here in a couple of days because we're going to be friends. But I haven't even met him yet.
Yeah,
There are a couple of really young Stoke guys, and they made an amazing report out of it too.
very cool.
And they were thoroughly blown away by it, understandably.
And these, I mean, it sounds like these kind of routes are like so committing and so involved that they're not really like the kind of routes that are going to be just like highly trafficked and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, it's going to take a
No,
very
they're-
specific kind of person that's going to want to go after this.
The toughest part of exploring is finding something to damn well explore, something that hasn't been done. And to do that in this day and age, you've really got to go out there and do, something extraordinary if it's going to be, worthy of the AAJ or feature article or the Alpinist magazine or something like that. So these are really high-end climbs as far as adventure and navigation and route finding, and not necessarily technical difficulty. The Southern Pickets Traverse was 10C. The Northern Pickets is old school 5.7.
So like 5.9.
Yeah, and Mongo Ridge was 10A, in my opinion. But relentless alpine environment.
What's it like being up there by yourself for 5 days? Like what kind of mental conversations are you having with yourself? Like what is that solo experience like?
It's different. It's so different. I tell you, it's like it turns up the intensity of the experience a lot because you don't have a summit event to steam. And oh man, wasn't that pitch crazy? You don't have somebody that can help you lead, bail you out if you get hurt. That's a completely different experience. You've really got to be hyper focused on the climbing, and you've really got to enjoy climbing. Because I have done some solo experiences where I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to be here. This is not fun. This is but if everything goes really well, and you make it and it's groundbreaking like that, you'll get another level of satisfaction that you couldn't get with a partner. I have to say, like you become like this universal player figure in your mind where you've done your purpose, if you will. It's an amazing feeling. Like I never came back from that trip fully. I always am sort of on that same trip in my life. It's taught me how valuable it is to be alive in such a circumstance as luxury as we have, that I'm just forever grateful, to this universe for it. Um, I feel like I'm a movie character, if you will, in a movie that just, you know, you get up every day and it's a new script. What's it going to be like? A tragedy, a comedy, probably a little both.
Yeah. Now, there's definitely something to putting yourself out there so far out on the edge where you come back to normal life and it's just like, yeah, it's just like everything's different. You see everything through a different lens.
So that was the phase I was the most proud of. I was also doing big new alpine routes in the Cascades, uh, ice climb, winter routes and stuff like that.
Okay,
But
let's hear it.
we don't seem to get the conditions anymore that we did. We get just like dumped on with snow. So it's tough to even ice climb our scrappy ice around here anymore, much less get up into the mountains. But oh darn, we have too much snow. What a terrible problem.
Yeah.
It was the drought years that where I was climbing those routes, and we'd get some snow, but we'd get amazing ice. So I'd go up in the North Cascades, and I was lucky enough to do a bunch of ice routes up there, which, just such a rare treat.
Doing first ascents?
Yeah. Or any ascents.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a few really nice first ascents in the winter.
Any of them get repeated or any specific ice climbs that you've been super psyched on?
A lot of all of my Mount Hood stuff got repeated. It's tough to repeat up here in the North Cascades. The Blue Moon got repeated, but not Pyramid Peak. The pool shrinks down a lot when you go into alpine and ice. Our good alpine climbers, they're up in Canada or Montana during that season. They're not hanging out here, waiting for the right conditions here.
Are they the kind of routes that are super ephemeral and like might not form every year, or are they like
that
pretty
too.
pretty consistent where it's like, all right,
A
this
few
thing's
of
gonna
them
be in.
a few of them are regular, but they get buried. Those approaches will get buried with snow pretty quick, and we don't have this amazing snowpack here where it's solid or nothing. We don't have bad avalanche conditions a lot, but we get bad snow conditions or just bad stoke because winters are long and dark and wet here. And to pull yourself out, and you'll have to wait like a week. You have to have like a week of good weather conditions here. So in that, you're just sitting there waiting for it for a week of nice days and trying to get something done maybe before it turns bad again. It's not a good formula for an aspiring alpine climber or winter climber to live here during the winter.
Yeah, like you said, they come and go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you said you had a new first ascent in the enchantment range?
Yeah, the Song of the Summer.
That was recent, right?
Yep. That took 4 trips up there.
Okay. And you did it with your wife?
My wife was on 2 of them. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
So
super cool to involve
talk to me about that objective and like what was that like? What was the vision? How was the experience?
I was climbing Dragon Tail with my wife on the Song of the Summer route last year, which is also this year. It's really popular. It's called This My Friend. And I just I saw this pinnacle to the left, and I'm like, well, look at that. I took a picture of it. And months later, I was scrolling, and I was like, I wonder if there's a new route to be done on that ridge. And it planted a bug in my brain. And I looked through the Bethy guide, and I found out it was Jabberwocky Tower. And there was 2 routes on it, but the short side of the pinnacle. Nobody had climbed this amazing spur that's now called the Southwest Spur. And so I went up there with one of my teenage friends that I teach through the Mountaineers Activity Club, which is teens 13 to 18. I usually teach them some skills every year, whether it's rock or alpine. Or we did an ice climbing class with them last year, and they got to ice climb a couple of times. It was really fun. And those kids are taking off. But I grabbed my best 18-year-old that I could recruit because he was off from school. I wouldn't go to the enchantments during the weekend because it's just too crazy. We're going to be trundling and drilling, and we don't want to freak out the hikers. So we went up in midweek and cut a trail through the brush and got 2 pitches up and decided, hey, this is a good looking route. And it doesn't look like anybody's been on it because we're trundling and it's brushing moss a little bit. So we left our gear up there or I left my gear up there, and we came back. Sam, the young guy, came back with me 2 more times, and he was instrumental, very instrumental in getting us up that route. From the first pitch, I'm leading up and I get up to these blocks and I'm like, this is a no-go. I'm coming back down. And he's like, Wayne, what about stepping to the right? There's a crack over there. And I'm like, really? And sure enough, I go over there and there was a crack over there. He led one of the pitches too. And he was just really helpful and instrumental. He helped drill the bolts by hand, which took forever. And he was just full of stoke. And on the 3rd trip, we made it to the top and finished the 7 pitches. But there was a backstory here. There was another party of local people that were crisscrossing our route at the same time and doing the same pitches in some instances. They did the first ascent of at least 2 of our pitches, doing their own route, the first and the last pitch. And all of the rest that was in between, I'm pretty sure was our particular new route, if you will, for our team. So I went up there with my wife and Sam as a team of 3 twice because we needed 2 ropes. We needed the scrubbing and the drilling people and the hauling and all the shenanigans, the pitons and stuff that you need to do a big new route like that. And we finished it right before the end of the summer, but it did see a couple of ascents after that, to mixed reviews. It's expectations. I came back and I said, this is the most amazing climb in the world. And everybody, people said, okay, maybe it's not. So I went back and I toned down my spray about it, but it's still a fantastic route.
What's it go at?
10C.
Okay. Is it pretty sustained, or is it like a single crux?
Most of the pitches are 510.
Okay.
And they're not really long cruxes. It's got several really just incredible pitches on it, and it's a ridge. At times, it's knife edge exposure, both sides. It's the perfect, like, I did 2 other new routes in the enchantments that are now really popular: Dragons of Eden on Dragon Tail and Solid Gold on Prusik Peak. Super popular routes now that they've been exposed. But I won't have to wait 20 years for this route to get popular, because I think it's, with the ease of approach and ease of descent and fun adventure that it packs, I think it's going to be right up there in popularity with, these other Song of the Summer routes, I call them.
Very cool. That's awesome, man. It's definitely something to be proud of. Putting up first ascents is the Lord's work.
Yeah, I've been doing them at Index, which is my favorite place to climb too for rock climbing. I started doing new routes there, and those have been getting good reviews.
Very cool
too. But yeah, Index is an incredible place to climb granite.
Those people that were on the route crisscrossing you, like, did you get there and they were already having started climbing, or did they like see you guys and then they're like, okay, we're going to do our route too? Or was it just
we were staggered. We were staggered in our trips. So they were there first, then we came along, then they came along again. And the only reason we knew something was up was they took our bail beaner off of our first anchor. So I knew somebody had been up there. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? So I went back and into town later on after that trip, on our second trip, and I got a text from my friend who lives over there, who's a connecting person. And he got a text from another person that said, hey, is this your friend Wayne's work? ? And that was the other party that we connected. So we actually connected at this point before I even finished the route. On the second trip, I found out about these guys and they found out about me, and we compared notes and pictures, and I drew things on pictures, and I went I also went back and finished the route. And I knew that they had done the very last pitch that I wanted to do and the very first pitch and part of the fourth. So I connected my pitches right on the ridge mostly in a really nice fashion. They were zigzagging more and crisscrossing the ridge more. Whereas I had this philosophy is, hey, if there's a good pitch on the ridge, that's where I want to be. And it worked out. It was a little competitive. Like they also, somebody took off another locking carabiner from our summit rappel too. And they were also rappelling off of dead trees. And I went and cut that webbing off and I put a proper rappel station on the summit. And I'm going to go back and put a substation because it's literally a 50-meter rappel off the summit right now and no other option for me. I'm not going to rappel off a dead tree. So there was this back and forth with these guys, with them. They published something on Mountain Project, but very little on their efforts up there. And I kind of stole the thunder, if you will.
Just because you were more vocal about it, right?
I was more vocal.
Yeah.
And I also put bolted anchors in where it needed to be bolted anchors, and they weren't going to they weren't willing to do that. I took the ridge line. Mm-hmm. I took a stance on these awful rappels that they were rappelling off of and installed proper rappels and cut loose the old ones and threw them away. I gave them to the AAC because they're trying to make a case now for bolted anchors in the wilderness because of the legislation is threatening. And there's a lot of pressure on it here.
In terms of trying to ban bolts in the wilderness?
Yeah, ban bolts, but also there's wilderness areas you have to hand drill that they want to do, that there's legislation to do away with permanent installations.
And why? Like, what's the purpose behind it? Like,
it's to have an ideal. And that's all we have anyways, is an ideal. And I actually am a big advocate for wilderness and pristine areas. And a little bit of me is pained that the only way I can put up a good quality route like this is to drill. It does pain me a bit. I'd love to have it to be just this amazing super classic that doesn't have any bolts, but it didn't work out that way. And I put safety first. And if I'm going to put my name on a route nowadays, it's going to be overdone, because I used to put up really crappy routes when I lived in Portland in Oregon, and I got a bad reputation for that. And the pendulum swung the other way, and now I'm over gearing and over drilling, if you will.
What would you define as like a crappy route? Like, what were
leading
you
notoriously doing? Instead of a bolt, running it out off of a small stopper instead of a bolt, putting a tree around a sling instead of at the top instead of a good, and not cleaning it up super well. I was about volume back then rather than quality, and my focus just shifted a lot. And I'm more concerned with how I'm viewed as a public figure too, and putting my name on a route. There's some expectations.
Yeah. Now, well, also it's like if you're putting up a route and then you're also quote unquote spraying about it. I mean, I would think that the main purpose of the spray is so that other people go to climb it, right? And if you're posting about it and it's like this thing that's like super risky and like doesn't have good anchors, and then it's like, well, okay, well, why are you really spraying about it now? Like, are you trying to get other people to climb it, or are you just trying to toot your own horn that you did something cool, you know?
No, that's a good point. I don't want anybody to get hurt on my routes. There's a route that a friend of mine did recently, and not recently, but it's had a lot of accidents on it. And even a recent one. And I think he almost wishes he hadn't done the route now, because there's been rescues and stuff.
Yeah, that would be tough. Yeah.
But it's really popular because it's a sport route. And I think the only reason people get in accidents is because of that. It's a multi-pitch sport route, and there's so much demand for that they'll go and push this traversing overhang that they shouldn't be falling off of. And so another thing that I'll touch on is I recently helped, and it was the driving force behind a major multi-crag development for dry tooling. And we needed that here in Seattle really bad. It's called Wayne's World.
Oh, nice.
That's what they named it. But I did, and it's spikes and it's long pitches, and people get deck and hit the ground with rope stretch and get poked. I don't want anybody to ever get hurt at Wayne. Somebody's gonna get hurt at Wayne's World someday. In fact, I've seen some comments online. The need believer may have already happened, but I don't want it to be because I under-equipped or didn't tell people.
Yeah, like couldn't you just put more bolts in and so it would be safer?
It's all bolts.
Okay, but
It's all
still,
bolts. It's spaced nicely, and it's all top rope access too. Really
oh,
well
cool. Yeah.
too. But you can still, with top roping, you can get enhanced rope stretch that way too. And that's the big danger of dry tooling, is you can pop off anywhere. If you pop off close to the ground, you're going to hit it if you're not careful. So I have, like I say, if I attach my name to it, it's gonna darn well be safe as possible.
That's good. That's cool. That's awesome. Dry tooling, I mean, at least in the very tiny experience that I've had with it in my life, it's like, especially down here, like in Southern Colorado, or maybe I just don't know, but it seems like kind of hard to find places to practice doing that. And it's also like, you don't want to go and fuck up a crag with your tools and like totally scratch it out. So you got to pick. It's like, I always feel kind of bad for dry toolers because you got to pick the shittiest, chossiest crag ever. And it's like, okay, though that's for the dry toolers. You know, like, well, come on, what the hell?
We got lucky because our crag is not that chossy, but it doesn't free climb well. And so it's got natural little triangle pick holes everywhere. And it's challenging. Like, it's not the same repetitive motion. Like, you got to flip and twirl, and every route has like this puzzle to solve. And you almost have to memorize them to do them successfully. So it's a fantastic, of course, anybody that has a crag named after him, I would say they're going to say it's fantastic. But we've got 50 routes out there now. And look at the stars that people put on Mountain Project. They're all 3- and 4-star routes. And we needed that here in Seattle because it's wet here. And if we don't have a good outdoor activity that we can do and it's wet, we put the tarps up and we go to town out there getting ready for ice climbing season. And it's really brought the community up of ice climbers. We're now producing, we've always been producing good climbers, but they have a place to train here locally now. And some of the teenage kids that I've been teaching, man, they're always out there and they're getting strong and they're putting up big routes too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's really cool to contribute and see it benefit the community at large. That's really awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to kind of start to wrap it up here. I've got like a couple final questions. Before I go into those, do you feel like there's anything critical that we're missing?
I've been looking at my notes, and I think you picked out that I'm pretty much self-taught. I did a bunch of adventures when I was young, like hitchhiking, that were really crazy too. And when I moved to California, it was with my thumb and my haul bags.
Oh, wow.
Something you just can't do now. I didn't have a car. I would hitchhike to Yosemite or Tahoe or back to Portland. I did a lot of that.
Is there a particular story in mind that you want to share?
I just wanted to share that things were so much different back then.
Yeah.
And that's how they were different. Just sort of my personal philosophy is, I think that we're here for a number of purposes, if you will, if I can stretch that far. And one of them is to kind of take care of the people that are in our sphere and help them and make their lives better. And your life will be better too, as a result of helping people. And you'll get what you want, especially in climbing. You can be a great soloist, but you can have much better experience. I have a partner that's not my wife, a climbing partner that I've known for 6 years now. And we don't climb as much as we used to, but in our heyday, we were getting out every weekend together. And we have similar names, Wayne and Lane. We just became like synonymous as a partnership. And we're such good friends, and climbing and my philosophy of helping and working with people that you like and get along with has led me to these amazing climbing partnerships. And he's the best example, one of the best examples. My wife's another great example. of how deep a friendship much deeper friendship you can get in climbing than you can get ordinarily, I think, because of the depth of the experience and the intensity and getting through it. And it'll either help your relationship tremendously, or it can also hurt it if things go south, because we are selfish and we do have our agendas. I have climbs I want to do. Lane's got climbs he wants to do. I tend to drive a lot, the pursuit. So, but I tell you, some of the best experiences have been his ideas, just because I had to, you know, retool for something that I wasn't expecting. And you just get to know people, for better, for worse, too. You get to know them better because weaknesses will be exposed, that we can hide easier without, a pursuit like this where we got to put it out on the line.
So you've been a climber for quite a long time, and you've been involved in the community in a way where I would imagine, at least in your local area, where you've seen the development of the climbing community as a whole. What are your thoughts on the climbing community as it is now, and like how has it changed over time?
Oh, great question. There's a lot of different answers to that. We used to be kind of freaks. Uh,
We're still
when
freaks. It's okay.
yeah, but we used to be even more so. And we were we were not like heroes of Yosemite Valley. We were like the dirtbags. And it used to just be this really fringe activity. It's mainstream now, and the community is it's so young now, and it's so new. It's constantly getting refreshed with new people, and almost to the point where it's driving some of the older ones out. Like our enchantments that we love to climb at, we can't get there because of the hikers now. The hikers will fill up all the parking, and so that people aren't climbing the enchantments hardly anymore. We're getting to almost victim status with how popular it's becoming. So, and the community itself in Seattle, I don't know if you know much about our sociology here.
I don't.
It's pretty cold, if you will.
Depressing.
So
And
you
cold.
have to, yeah, people, and it's also transient. Like people move in and out all the time.
Yeah.
You have to make new friends.
Mm.
Most people in Seattle don't have a lot of friends. Climbing is a big part of that. They have to go out and have climbing partnerships to make friends, because it's not an easy place to meet people or get connected with people. We're just not you'd think we would be more social with our weather, but we're really not that social. And then as far as changing, I think it's gotten to where people are getting so good so quick too. There's an expectation. Like I see new people out there trying 511s. Yeah, and they can't climb them, but they don't know that, and they're not being told that you can't. So the community is really lifting people right now. Hopefully not too quickly, but the effect is amazing, because I see really talented climbers out there at the age that I was not performing at the same level, when I was that age, for a number of reasons. But there wasn't the expectation like there kind of is now. So, and it's growing so much right now. It almost feels like it's disconnecting a little bit. Like I used to always be able to go to this crag or that and run into somebody that I know, and it ain't that way anymore. It just isn't.
Easily starts to develop cliques and kind of like a
Yeah,
yeah,
or a
like
local scene, if you will.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's not bad. We're a victim of our own success here. And if it is such a great sport, well, we should be able to put up with the crowds.
Yep.
And
And if you are complaining about the crowds, there's always places to go that aren't crowded.
that was going to be my end. I'll
Yeah.
take you places where there's nobody. I know
Exactly.
where they are.
And then, yeah, I think that's the heart of it, right? It's like if you really want to be away from all the crowds, don't go to the classic areas, or find a way to build a schedule where you're not climbing on the weekends. Because
Yeah.
I mean, even here in Red Rock in Vegas, like sure, like if you want to go climb Crimson Chrysalis on the weekend, you're going to be behind, unless you're there at 4 a.m, you're going to be behind 3 parties. Someone's going to be epicing, someone's going to be rapping on top of you, like someone's dropping cams. Like it's going to be a shit show.
Yep.
Just know the environment, know where you're at, and don't show up to Crimson Chrysalis on a Sunday and then complain about it on social media.
Agreed. Totally
Yep.
agreed.
Yep. What about where our climbing community might be struggling now? Where do you see us kind of, where's like a weakness we have as a climbing community?
It's my pet peeve. One of my pet peeves is this etiquette of just an of self-awareness and an etiquette in general, like hogging routes, top roping the first pitch of a multi-pitch route, stuff like that. I don't think we have like proper stewardship, or we're not getting the institutional memory of kind of the crag etiquette, if you will, and take dogs, for example, or take, how many more laps are you guys going to be doing on this kind of a question? And then being honest with me, his girlfriend's going to do it too. Oh, okay. Well, tell me that first so I can go do something else, that kind of thing. So I think we're struggling in etiquette, and I think we're struggling with an intangible where we're getting, our ability is up here and our experience is down here.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think we're set up for more, and that in between ground is what I call accidents. And I think that we have more potential for accidents.
Yep.
I think that people need to spend more time learning their craft. We have fun with it. It's a tremendously fun sport, but learning is really serious. The learning is really serious. The worst possible thing that I could imagine is witnessing or being part of an accident in climbing. And of course I've been there. And of course I would do anything to avoid those. And then I would want everybody else to do the same, because it's a big imposition on everybody, not just the injured person, to retool and have it become a rescue or just this bummer day because this guy broke his leg or worse.
Yep.
So that to me is like, I don't see a bunch of accidents. I don't get the rescue feeds or whatever either. But if there's a place that I could point that we could do better, that would be it.
I would say it's probably a lot more rampant than we even know.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we see like all the accidents on Whipper Media on Instagram. We hear about the North, like there's a whole book published about accidents every year from the American Alpine Club. And that, to me, that just means that's like the scratching the surface of like
those
all
are the people that
stuff
voluntarily write in.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, I think that was a really good point you made about how like our abilities are here and our knowledge is here as a community. And it's like, we really need to balance that out.
We need to balance it out a little better.
Yep. What does the future look like for you? What do you have planned?
Another good question
On the horizon.
I think I'm gonna keep doing new routes. I did new routes when I was younger, and then I took like 25 years off doing new routes. And now that I'm retired and I don't have to go to work every day, I like work. And boy, putting up new routes, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
And it's neat to tackle a project. And I'm a project-driven person. And I tell you, after 50 years of climbing in the Northwest, I've done most of the climbs I want to do in the Northwest. So I travel a lot, and I'm always willing to travel to. I haven't been in the past willing to travel to rock climb specifically, but I am now. But I try to green things up. I'm an environmentalist. The future for me is going to be finding midweek partners and doing more new routes and exploring more things around here, and then traveling as much as I can, and then getting my wife to retirement in 6, 7, 8 years is another big thing. And we got a little RV trailer that we're going to pull around and join our friends that are already doing it, retired. So the future's really bright as long as, like the climate doesn't get, another level of bad quick.
You mean hot or cold?
Hotter and hotter, yeah, which
Keep
is
going north,
very
right?
noticeable too, to a degree.
Yeah.
But I pay big attention to the weather, being an ice climber, and they're suffering maybe even worse up north sometimes than we are down here. It's just finding the right place at the right time. We get smoke too that we have to work around, extra engineering that goes into today's big routes. Like we wanted to do a big tour through the Rockies, the Northern Rockies this year, and it just didn't happen, you know? So I like to think the future's bright, but it's only as bright as, we can be fortunate enough to have in, with the future that we've got, that we're looking at.
Yep. Yeah, we never know what's going to happen either. It's like, I feel like, I mean, I'm just going to use like World War II as an example. It's like that was back in the 40s. We haven't seen anything that's been on such a huge global scale, either political or national disaster wise or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it could happen at any moment.
We haven't been tested as much as World War II since, certainly. But I think that, climate change is our World War II. And we could very easily lose this war unless, different, certain things fall into place, if you will.
Do you have any closing message for, people listening to this podcast, whether it be, people, your audience or just the climbing majority in general?
I like to usually address and teach, if I can, young people or teachers. And I would tell them to do that too. If you learn your sport, teach your sport, and bring these people up and be a good example of a climber or somebody that climbs, and just be a steward and ambassador. Pretend like you're famous and your opinion matters, even if it doesn't, if you don't feel that it does. It does. We all have an influence, and we can all do something to lift up our community and to help people. We just have to get over, this natural selfishness that we have, or own it and work with it. But also, you can't get anything unless you give.
That concludes today's episode, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. It really means a lot to me that you're here. If you liked today's episode, please be sure to rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This simple gesture helps the algorithm share this podcast with new listeners. Please also share this podcast with your friends. Word of mouth is honestly the best way to support the show. Also, if you're psyched about what we're doing here at The Climbing Majority, please reach out, DM me via Instagram, or email me at theclimbingmajoritypodcast@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. And don't forget, you can watch our full episodes on YouTube. Stay tuned for our next episode, where I sit down with climbing couple Cody and Victoria to talk about their recent attempt on the Matterhorn. Until then, keep exploring, stay safe, and as always, thanks for being a part of The Climbing Majority. I will see you all in 2 weeks.